William Wordsworth, number 11, Surprised by Joy, composed later than June 1812 and published in 1815. Surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turn to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, deep buried in the silent tomb? That spot which no vicissitude can find, love, faithful love, recalled thee to my mind. But how could I forget thee? Through what power, even for the least division of an hour, have I been so beguiled as to be blind to my own grievous loss? That thought's return was the worst pang that sorrow ever bore, save one only, when I stood forlorn, knowing my heart's best treasure was no more. That neither present time nor years unborn could to my sight thy heavenly face restore. In this sonnet we can feel Wordsworth's anguish. What an awful year 1812 must have been, not only for William, but also Mary his wife and Dorothy his sister. In June of that year, 1812, William's daughter Catherine, aged 4, had died, and in December he lost Thomas, his son, aged 6. Surprised by Joy was probably written in February of the following year, 2013. It is thought that the sonnet referred to his daughter, who had spent many hours with William as he wrote. It is also thought that she may have been a Down syndrome child, as elsewhere he referred to her as my little Chinese maiden. Catherine was the delight of the Wordsworth household, being a very happy child. Could it be that as Thomas became sick, William's attention was concentrated on the possibility of losing another child, and he hadn't been able to mourn his dear little Catherine? Nature was always a refuge for Wordsworth, and one can imagine his response, a moment of joy, only to feel that pang of loss and feel guilty that he could feel such joy. Have I been so beguiled as to be blind to my grievous loss, that thought's return was the worst pang that sorrow ever bore? It wasn't unusual to lose a child or children from disease in the 19th century, but as we read the poem, we realise that parents then shared the indescribably grief suffered by parents through the centuries. Reading the poem, we feel the anguish with him and for all those parents who grieve for their dead child. I can think of nothing worse than losing a child. It reverses what seems the natural order of life. Sadly, we may have mitigated the loss from disease since the time of Wordsworth, but as we know, families still suffer the loss of a child all too often. During this pandemic, when there have been many deaths, or many lives have been lost in natural disasters or war, and each evening reported on the TV, we see a rising graph of deaths. It might be all too easy to see each death as a statistic. However, each person will have left someone, or many, grieving for them. The time will come when those who mourn will suddenly want to share a moment with the deceased, only to suffer that overwhelming sense of loss, knowing that the deceased won't be coming back, just as Wordsworth did for his daughter. The poem seems to me to express that sense of loss much better than a statistic ever could. Different art forms allow for that anguish to be expressed and shared in a way statistics and reportage never will.